Billionaire targeted at airport. 10 minutes later, he owned the entire terminal. "Drop your bag! Hands where I can see them!" The command cut through the noise of the terminal like a sniper shot, sharp and unnerving. It wasn't shouted at a violent suspect or a raving lunatic. It was hurled, full volume, at a man who had done nothing more than walk through the entrance of Lexington International Airport. Jasper Reed froze mid-step, his carry-on dangling from his fingertips, a passport barely visible in his other hand. In a crisply pressed charcoal travel hoodie and black tapered slacks, he looked every bit like a quiet businessman catching a red-eye. But to the trembling TSA officer in front of him, his skin tone was louder than his silence. 3 shots cracked across the terminal. People screamed. Luggage hit the floor with a chorus of thuds. A stroller rolled free from a woman who dived behind a pillar. The echo of the bullets bounced off the high glass walls, colliding with the chaos below. Jasper didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He was already on the ground, instinct overriding shock. One arm folded beneath him, the other raised slightly, not out of surrender, but to protect his face from the shrapnel of assumptions. He hadn't been hit, but that hardly seemed to matter. Above him, Officer Brent Mallory stood with his weapon still raised, eyes wild, hands shaking just enough to betray the confidence in his voice. "Suspect attempted to bypass screening protocol," Mallory barked into his shoulder mic, not even bothering to check whether Jasper had made a single false move. "I didn't even make it to the line," Jasper said quietly, his voice low, his breath measured. Mallory didn't respond. Another officer approached, much younger, his name tag reading Hernandez. His gun was holstered. His expression was pure confusion. "He didn't do anything," Hernandez whispered. "He fits the description," Mallory snapped. "Black male, late 30s, possible threat." "You shot at a man holding a passport," Hernandez replied, disbelief washing over his face. Jasper's palms were now flat on the tile. He slowly turned his head and made eye contact with the boyish officer. There was no fear in his gaze, only a quiet fury. "I want your supervisor," Jasper said. "Now!" Mallory didn't wait. He motioned to 2 others behind him, and Jasper was yanked up roughly by his elbows. Plastic zip ties cut into his wrists, too tight and deliberate. Mallory leaned in close, a sneer curling at the edge of his mouth. "You think you can walk in here like you own the place?" he whispered. Jasper looked him dead in the eye. "I do now." That stopped Mallory cold, but only for a second. He recovered with a scoff, motioning to escort Jasper to a holding room. Passengers stared. Some filmed. Most stayed frozen, unsure whether to help or hide. 10 minutes ago, Jasper Reed had stepped into the airport like any other traveler. Now he was being walked through a restricted corridor like a criminal. No one asked for ID, no one checked his bag. No one noticed that the man they just opened fire on without cause was the CEO of Omnitech Energy, one of the largest privately owned energy tech firms in the country, a Fortune 50 name, a major donor to multiple federal commissions. Because Jasper had decided today to leave his security team behind. No assistant, no luxury car drop-off, no entourage, just himself, a one-way ticket to DC, and a quiet determination to move unseen. He wanted to test something, see how the world would react to him without the shield of power. Now he knew. Inside the small concrete-walled holding room, the overhead fluorescent lights buzzed with a dull, sickly glow. Jasper sat in silence, zip-tied to a bolted-down chair. His wrists throbbed. But his expression remained still. There was a single camera in the corner. Red light on. Blinking, recording, he wanted that. He hoped it caught everything. The shooting, the silence, the smirk. Outside the door, voices rose, angry, defensive, anxious. Then a knock. The door opened slowly, revealing a middle-aged man in a wrinkled blazer and a crooked airport badge that read, Dennis Wilcox, Deputy Security Chief. He didn't look Jasper in the eye. I'm, sorry about the, incident. There was confusion at the entrance. Jasper stared at him, unmoving. He didn't blink. You discharged a firearm at an unarmed man with no warrant, no probable cause, no conversation. Wilcox licked his lips. It's protocol. No. Protocol doesn't cover blind executions. Wilcox opened a thin manila folder, fumbling. We've got reports of a potential threat. You matched certain descriptors. It's not personal. Jasper leaned forward slightly. It never is. Until it is. Silence. Then Jasper shifted in his seat and looked directly into the camera above. I hope this is being recorded, because what happens next will need to be studied in every law school and federal training seminar in this country. Wilcox's hands visibly shook. Sir, if there's someone we can call— You already did, Jasper said quietly. Wilcox looked confused. I don't follow. Jasper tilted his head. Your director is about to receive a call that makes his career flash before his eyes. At that exact moment, 30 feet down the corridor, a phone rang in the office of Airport Director Colin Madsen. Line 1, unlisted. Urgent. When he picked up, the voice on the other end was calm. Controlled. This is Samuel Trent, General Counsel for Omnitech Energy. You have our CEO in a locked room. You discharged weapons on federal property. We are issuing a cease and release order. You have 10 minutes. Madsen's face went pale. Back in the holding room, Jasper slowly stood as the door opened again, this time with 5 people in suits standing behind it. His restraints were clipped without a word. He walked out, adjusting his sleeves, his posture steady, his steps unhurried. No one could meet his eyes. As he passed Officer Hernandez, the younger man swallowed hard and whispered, I'm sorry, sir. Jasper stopped. Then fix what you saw, he said. Don't bury it. He continued walking. Outside, the chaos had calmed, but murmurs filled the air. Video clips had already made it onto social media. Someone had posted, Black guy just got shot at in Lexington Airport for literally existing. But no one yet knew who that man was. Jasper stepped outside into the crisp morning air. His driver, Alex, waited beside a sleek black sedan. As he slid into the back seat, Alex handed him a phone, the screen already lit with missed calls and messages from executives, senators, and federal aviation officials. What now, sir? Alex asked. Jasper looked out the window, back at the terminal that had almost erased him. We're not going to court, he said calmly. We're taking the whole building. Alex raised an eyebrow. Jasper smiled faintly. They wanted a profile. I'll give them one. Mine, etched in the damn name above the entrance. The room was cold, not just from the AC that rattled in the ceiling, but from the silence that had thickened like fog. Jasper stood alone now, no longer cuffed, but still very much trapped in the aftershock. The thin red line that had wrapped his wrists was still fresh, visible against his skin as he flexed his hands for the first time in over an hour. He didn't pace. He didn't sit. He just stood, staring at the surveillance camera blinking red above the corner of the room. He knew it was still rolling. He wanted it to. Outside, the terminal buzzed faintly with resumed motion. Flights were delayed. Announcements stuttered over the loudspeakers, but inside this back office, tucked away behind restricted doors, it was just him and the quiet tension of exposed failure. The door creaked open again. A different man entered this time. Tall, mid-50s, dark grey suit, the kind of demeanor that tried to project authority but crumbled under pressure. A thin sheen of sweat clung to his receding hairline. His name tag, pinned just off-center, read Ron Carlin, Chief of Airport Security. "Mr. Reed," Ron said quickly, clearing his throat. "We've been informed of the situation." Jasper didn't respond. Carlin stepped in further, adjusting his collar. "I want to personally apologize on behalf of the airport. We're looking into the matter." Still no response. Carlin's eyes darted toward the camera, then back to Jasper. "I understand there was some confusion at the checkpoint. These things escalate sometimes when certain cues are misread." Jasper's voice finally came, slow and flat. "Is that what you're calling 3 bullets? Misread cues?" Carlin froze. Jasper took a step closer, voice steady. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't stop to question if I was armed. You didn't verify anything. You just fired." "That was Officer Mallory's decision," Carlin stammered. "And who trained Officer Mallory?" Carlin looked like he'd swallowed a pin. We're conducting an internal review." "It's protocol. Officer Mallory has been placed on temporary leave while we assess the body cam footage." "He turned it off," Jasper said calmly. Carlin's face twisted. "What?" "His camera, disabled at the moment he drew his weapon." Carlin blinked. "How do you—" "I make energy surveillance systems, Mr. Carlin. Your entire airport uses a watered-down version of our AI traffic suite. Every blink, every heat shift, every directional mic feed from that terminal ran through architecture my company built." "I knew the camera was off before he even raised his voice." Carlin went pale. "Then why didn't you stop him?" Jasper's eyes hardened. "Because I wanted to see what happens when I'm just a man. Not a billionaire, not a name, not a title. Just a black man in an airport." Carlin had no answer. Jasper turned toward the wall where a bulletin board displayed outdated procedural notices and faded TSA certifications. "You still have the 2019 guidance for traveler engagement on the wall. That protocol was recalled 2 years ago." Carlin followed his gaze but said nothing. "Tell me something," Jasper continued. "If I had been shot, would you have dragged my name through the press before the blood even dried? Claimed I was hostile, a danger, a potential threat?" "That's not fair," Carlin muttered. "No, what's not fair is that I had to risk getting shot to prove a system like yours sees people like me as a hazard instead of a human." A knock on the door interrupted them. A young woman in a sharp navy dress suit stepped inside, holding a tablet. Her voice was calm, efficient. "Mr. Reed, your legal counsel is on the line. It's marked priority." "Thank you, Kelly," Jasper said, taking the tablet without breaking his gaze from Carlin. Carlin's eyebrows twitched at the familiarity. She works for him? The realization sank in deeper. Jasper tapped the screen, and the voice of Samuel Trent filled the air. "We've confirmed the initial broadcast reached Senator Marchand's office. He's asking for a private briefing before the Oversight Committee gets wind." Jasper nodded slightly. "What about the footage?" "We've secured both the gate checkpoint and the external thermal sensor data. And yes, the camera-facing baggage claim caught the entire event from a clean angle. Audio too." "All synced. One bullet missed your shoulder by 2 inches. Another shattered the terminal glass behind you." Carlin turned a shade whiter. "Send the raw files to the FAA watchdog team," Jasper said. "No editing, no commentary. Just the truth. You got it. And Sam," Jasper added, "start building the Black Sky report. We're going public in stages." "Already underway." Jasper ended the call and turned back to Carlin. "There's going to be an audit. A big one. Not just of your officers, of your hiring practices, your incident records, your closed complaints, your training modules. You don't just need a PR team. You need a lawyer. Carlin tried to regain footing. Mr. Reed, we can settle this privately. We'll offer full cooperation, of course, and compensation if... Jasper cut him off with a low laugh, no humor in it. You think this is about money? Carlin froze. Jasper stepped forward, his voice sharper now. This isn't about compensation. This is about correction. You don't get to shoot at me and then buy your way out of accountability. I didn't shoot, Carlin snapped, the first trace of defiance showing. But you built the culture that allowed someone to do it, Jasper replied. Silence again. Jasper handed the tablet back to Kelly. Tell Mallory to get a lawyer. And Carlin looked up slowly. Cancel your afternoon meetings. Why? Jasper's eyes narrowed. Because in an hour, this terminal isn't going to be yours anymore. And with that, he walked out. No security guards flanked him. No police stopped him. The same terminal that had tried to bury him in silence now parted in awkward, terrified respect. A wave of phones lifted into the air as people whispered and gasped. Is that him? He's the one they shot at. He's the one who owns everything now. Jasper kept walking. Past the gate. Past the checkpoint. Past the bloodless crime scene no one had cleaned. Out to the curb, where a sleek black vehicle waited. He climbed in, adjusted his jacket, and gave one simple order. Take me to the Capitol. Because the fight wasn't over. It was only just taking off. The phone rang exactly 2 minutes after Jasper stepped into the back seat of his car. The screen lit up with a single word. Private. He answered without hesitation. This is Jasper. The voice on the other end was crisp, clipped, and cold. Mr. Reed, this is Director Franklin Ayres, Federal Aviation Security Oversight. I was just informed of an incident involving you at Lexington International. I need a direct statement. Unfiltered. Jasper leaned his head back against the seat, eyes watching the city race past through tinted windows. I was shot at, he said evenly. 3 times. By an airport officer who never asked my name, never asked for ID. He pulled his weapon because I was black, wearing a hoodie and walking alone. Ayres was quiet for a beat. Were you armed? No. Were you aggressive? No. Did you say anything prior to being fired on? I asked which gate the Washington, D.C. flight was boarding from. Another silence. Longer this time. We're escalating this immediately, Ayres said, voice lower now. But be aware, once this starts, it won't be clean. Jasper didn't flinch. It was never clean to begin with. He ended the call without waiting for a response. By the time he reached the private suite at the Albrecht Hotel, a discreet high-rise often used by political consultants and corporate executives, his inner circle was already assembled. Lionel Carter, his chief legal officer, was pacing near the floor-to-ceiling window, phone to his ear. Naomi Sloan, head of digital operations and optics, sat on a sleek white sofa, tablet in hand, swiping through a growing flood of social media posts. And across from them, in a chair pulled slightly away from the group, sat the only person not part of Omnitech, Edward Langston, Jasper's crisis strategist. Edward looked up when Jasper entered. They've started damage control, he said flatly. Mallory's been put on leave. The airport issued a 30-word statement calling it a procedural misunderstanding. Jasper took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing faint red marks still etched into his wrists. No press conference. They're testing the wind first, Naomi said, trying to see if this blows over or explodes. Jasper looked at her. It's going to explode. He turned to Lionel. Where are we on the footage? Lionel walked over with a secure drive in hand. All 3 camera angles? Gate C4 internal feed, perimeter thermal, and that lovely civilian smartphone clip someone leaked already. We have clear visual of Mallory's stance, the shots fired, and you, standing motionless. Any audio? Yes. Mallory yells, "Stop!" and fires within 2 seconds. No visible threat, no escalation, nothing. Jasper looked down at the drive. I want a composite edit made, no narration, no dramatic music. Just the raw sequence with synced time codes. Edward folded his arms. You're leaking it? Jasper didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the long table at the center of the suite, where a map of Lexington International was spread out. Markers were pinned across it. Security zones, blind spots, high traffic junctions. This was never just about Mallory, Jasper said quietly. He's not the problem. He's the outcome. Naomi glanced up. You're going after the system. Jasper nodded. We've spent years building platforms for automation, surveillance, transparency. Yet here I am, nearly dead, because none of that saved me. Edward rubbed his temples. Look, Jasper, I get the anger, but going straight for the jugular means war. The FAA, DHS, police unions, airline lobbies, they're not going to let you walk in and dismantle them. I'm not asking for permission, Jasper said. Lionel spoke next, his voice lower. We also pulled Mallory's internal record. Jasper looked up sharply. Lionel placed a thin file on the table. 4 prior complaints, 2 settled quietly, 1 dismissed without investigation. 1 sealed by someone in internal affairs. We found a name, Lauren Bishop. Jasper flipped the file open. A printed memo lay on top. Redacted lines, signatures, the usual shield. He ran his fingers along the page. I know that name. Edward's eyes narrowed. Who is she? Head of Internal Affairs for the Southeastern Aviation District, Lionel answered. Everything from Atlanta to Miami runs through her office. She's got final review on disciplinary action for all regional security officers. Jasper's voice dropped. She was on the oversight committee that rejected my company's pitch for AI pattern tracking software last year. Naomi raised her eyebrows. Conflict of interest? Worse, Jasper said. A vendetta. Edward stood slowly. So what's the plan? Jasper tapped the folder, then the map, then the drive. We expose her. We expose the cover-ups. We connect the pattern. And the footage? Jasper paused for a long second. Release it tonight, but only to 3 outlets. Independent, diverse, credible. No filters, no framing. Naomi was already typing. We'll get a composite cut ready in an hour. Edward frowned. What's the endgame here, Jasper? Is this about justice, or is this about taking the terminal? Jasper turned toward him. I don't want just the terminal, he said. I want the trust it was supposed to protect. I want the structure that allows these moments to happen, burned down and rebuilt. Lionel crossed his arms. Then we need a name. A name? Naomi asked. For the project, he said. The campaign. The movement. Everyone looked at Jasper. He stared out the window for a long time, watching the sun dip below the city skyline, casting long shadows across the streets. Then he spoke, his voice calm but unshakable. Call it Black Skies. Edward nodded slowly. That'll get their attention. No, Jasper said. The footage will get their attention. He turned back toward the room, fire behind his eyes. Black Skies will make sure they never forget. The footage dropped at 7:14 p.m. Eastern. No fanfare. No press release. Just 3 independent media outlets with pristine reputations uploading a synchronized file titled Lexington Incident, Raw Footage. Within minutes, it went viral. On screen, the terminal buzzed with everyday movement. Travelers wheeled bags. A mother held her child's hand. Jasper Reed entered frame, calm, hands at his sides, moving with quiet intent toward the gate. Then, in terrifying clarity, Officer Brent Mallory stepped into the shot, barked a command, and opened fire. 3 rounds echoed. Passengers screamed. Jasper dropped, palms raised. No threat, no escalation. No justification. And then the screen went black. Across the internet, silence shattered into outrage. Comments poured in, celebrities reposted, political figures cautiously weighed in. Unarmed, unprovoked, unbelievable. By 8:20 p.m., the footage had surpassed 12 million views. Hashtags climbed the charts. Hashtag shot for existing black skies are coming. We saw. At this time inside the Lexington International boardroom, chaos was unraveling fast. Colin Madsen, the airport's director, was on his 3rd phone call in 10 minutes and sweating through his shirt. "This is not a coordinated takedown," he barked into the phone. "It's a single incident." "We're cooperating." But the person on the other end wasn't listening, because news had broken that 4 major corporate partners, Omnitech included, were suspending all business travel through Lexington. Airlines were panicking. 2 had requested emergency rerouting for international connections. Madsen slammed the phone down and turned to his staff. "I need eyes on our security chain." "How did this leak happen?" No one answered. Then someone finally spoke, quietly from the corner. "It wasn't a leak." It was released, with intention. Madsen turned to see a junior analyst, wide-eyed, holding a tablet. Her voice barely broke above a whisper. Omnitech sent out a public timestamp report, linking the footage with 3 previous civil complaints against Officer Mallory. They knew exactly where to aim. He grabbed the tablet and scrolled. There it was, a clean infographic overlaying the footage with historical misconduct data, internal memos, redacted reports, and sealed complaint summaries. One name stood out across all of them: Lauren Bishop. "Get me Bishop!" Madsen growled. "Now!" But it was already too late. Because Lauren Bishop was watching the same footage from her high-rise apartment in Atlanta, hands trembling around a glass of wine she hadn't touched. Her phone buzzed non-stop. 3 missed calls from DHS. 2 from her attorney and 1 from a blocked number. She answered. Lauren Bishop. A voice she recognized immediately replied, "You sealed Mallory's records." Her breath hitched. "Jasper, you buried complaints." "Signed off on settlements, suppressed investigations." "I followed protocol," she said quickly, defensive now. "None of it was criminal." "None of it stuck." "No," Jasper replied calmly, "but it left a pattern, and patterns don't stay buried forever." He paused, "Especially when they're leaking out of every crack in your house." Bishop stood, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter. "What do you want?" "I want to see if you'll flinch before the system you built collapses on top of you." The line went dead. She stared at the phone, her breath shallow. Then she moved quickly, gathering paper files from a drawer, stuffing them into a leather briefcase, calling her driver. But she didn't notice the man parked outside across the street, snapping photos of every move. Back at the Albrecht Hotel, Jasper watched multiple screens light up in sync. Airlines, corporate partners, news tickers, and flight boards. Naomi Sloan sat beside him, cross-referencing traffic reroute estimates. "We've got 8 companies freezing contracts through Lexington, 2 European airlines pulling transatlantic landings. This isn't just symbolic anymore, Jasper. This is economic pressure," Lionel added, "and legal. The footage, the connected complaints, Bishop's fingerprints on 3 of them. This is enough for a federal inquiry. Jasper nodded. Send the full archive to the FAA, Homeland Security, and Senator Marchand's office. Make sure they understand this is not a press stunt. This is an indictment. Naomi hesitated, then leaned forward. There's something else. What? Someone contacted us anonymously. A whistleblower, internal security at Lexington. They're scared. But they have proof of an unreported racial profiling policy used in officer training. Jasper looked up sharply. Do we trust them? Too early to tell, she said. But they're willing to meet. Off-site. On your terms. Set it up, he said without hesitation. At that moment, Lionel's phone buzzed. He read the text aloud. FAA just sent a reply. One sentence. Preliminary suspension of operating license under active review. Prepare formal statements. Silence settled over the room. Naomi exhaled. It's happening. Jasper leaned back in his chair, eyes on the skyline beyond the windows. No, he said. It's beginning. Miles away, Officer Brent Mallory sat alone in his apartment, the TV flickering with his own image on repeat. His badge sat on the table beside a single envelope marked Administrative Leave Pending Review. He opened his laptop. A new email from an address he didn't recognize had just landed. Subject, we know. He clicked it open. Inside was a single photo. It showed him, 5 years earlier, shoving a teenage boy against a checkpoint scanner, fear on the kid's face, fists clenched at his sides. Attached was a note. One bullet didn't miss. The rest of your life just did. He closed the laptop. Outside, the city moved like nothing had changed. Inside, everyone who thought they could hide behind protocol was starting to feel the walls closing in. And Jasper Reed hadn't even taken the podium yet. The parking lot of the shuttered auto repair shop was dark and silent, except for the rhythmic hum of a vending machine long unplugged. Jasper stood just outside his vehicle, flanked by Naomi and a security detail parked discreetly across the street. He wore a black field jacket and a simple baseball cap. Nothing about him said billionaire, but everything about his stance said watchful. At exactly 9:00 p.m., a second car pulled in, an older Nissan Altima with one working headlight and a license plate so dusty it was barely legible. The driver stepped out, a thin, nervous man in his early 40s. He wore a janitor's jacket over a TSA-issued polo. His eyes darted toward every shadow. Name? Jasper asked, calm. Eric Quinn, the man said, voice shaking. I work nights. Internal custodial access. You're the one who messaged Naomi. Yes, sir. I saw what happened to you. I've seen a lot of things. Jasper gestured toward the bench near the vending machine. Talk. Eric hesitated, then sat, fingers twitching at the edge of his sleeves. They train us to see threats, he began, but not real ones, just patterns. Words like suspicious clothing and non-compliant posture. Those are coded. You know what they really mean. Jasper said nothing. Eric swallowed. A few months back, they updated our internal briefing decks. There's this slide buried deep. Slide 47. It lists priority risk indicators. Hoodies, baggy pants. Certain hair types, beards. Naomi stiffened beside Jasper. They've turned profiling into policy, she said flatly. Eric nodded quickly. Unofficially, yes, but they call it behavior-based targeting. It gives officers latitude to engage based on instinct, and they're told not to document low-level escalations unless an arrest is made, which means 90% of incidents vanish. You have proof? Jasper asked. Eric hesitated. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive, sealed in plastic. Internal slides, training audio, notes from supervisors. I took them over time. Been sitting on it for months. After you got shot at, I couldn't stay quiet. Jasper took the drive, holding Eric's gaze. You know what happens if they find out you leaked this. I'm counting on you to make sure they don't, Eric said, almost pleading. Naomi stepped forward. You'll be protected. Full whistleblower shield. Relocated if necessary. We've done this before. Eric looked at her, then at Jasper and nodded. Then he said something unexpected. It wasn't just that they shot at you. It was that everyone just watched, like it was normal. Jasper's jaw tightened. It is normal. That's the problem. Back at the Albrecht suite, the team gathered around the long table, monitors glowing with fresh documents, case files, and social media sentiment trackers. The flash drive Eric had handed over was already decrypted. Naomi dropped the first training module into the shared display. A monotone voice began narrating over a PowerPoint slide. In high-risk zones, prioritize passengers displaying non-verbal anxiety cues and non-conforming attire. This includes non-standard headwear, overtly casual clothing, and rapid scanning behavior. Lionel scoffed. Non-standard headwear? They mean durags and hijabs. Naomi's face was pale. There's an entire segment on verbal deflection that literally lists common responses black travelers give when they're profiled. Why are you stopping me? Is flagged as escalation. Edward stood from his chair, pacing. We're not just dealing with one dirty officer or a bad decision. This is systematized bias. Federally backed. Bureaucratically codified. It's a quiet doctrine. Jasper nodded slowly. And now we bring it into the light. The next morning, headlines exploded again. Whistleblower confirms racial targeting in TSA training at Lexington. Slide 47. The smoking gun behind the Reed incident. Internal bias policies spark congressional outrage. In Washington, Senator Gloria Marchand stood in front of a podium with the Capitol behind her, gripping a red folder. We now have concrete evidence that racial profiling was institutionalized within key transportation security training. Mr. Reed's case is no longer isolated. It is the tip of something much more disturbing. At Lexington International, the fallout was immediate. Flights were delayed. Security lines slowed as staff whispered and panicked. In a glass conference room overlooking Terminal B, Lauren Bishop stared at her reflection in the window, arms folded. Behind her, the airport's legal counsel read from his phone. The FAA has issued a preliminary suspension pending investigation. We've been given 72 hours to comply with full data transparency or face a federal shutdown. We're not going to survive this, the CFO muttered. Lauren turned slowly, her voice steel. We don't fold, we redirect. Blame Mallory. Say he misinterpreted protocol, make him the outlier. He was following your orders, the counsel said. We have internal signatures. Your name is everywhere. Her face twitched, just once. Then the door opened. Colin Madsen entered, holding a printed copy of Jasper's newest press statement. It had been posted less than 10 minutes ago. He read it aloud. If you trained people to shoot at shadows, don't act surprised when they hit someone real. This ends now, not with apologies, with audits. With accountability. With change. Jasper Reed. Madsen looked at Lauren. Do you still think you're the one in control? She didn't answer. Because across the country, airports were beginning to panic. Because in every boardroom, executives were asking the same question. Who else has a slide 47? Because in the span of a week, Jasper Reed had gone from being a target to becoming a mirror. And the system was being forced to look at itself. The hearing chamber inside the Hart Senate office building was packed wall to wall. News cameras lined the back, their red lights blinking like warning beacons. Staffers whispered behind folders. Senators adjusted microphones, but every pair of eyes in the room eventually landed on the man sitting calmly at the witness table. Jasper Reed. No suit, no tie, just a charcoal grey sweater, sleeves rolled, and a simple watch on his wrist. Beside him sat Naomi, Lionel, and Edward, silent, focused. But Jasper was alone at the table, his presence as still as a storm gathering pressure. Senator Gloria Marchand leaned into her mic. "Mr. Reed, you're now under oath, do you understand?" Jasper nodded once. "I do." "Then you may begin your statement." He didn't pick up any papers, didn't look at notes. Instead, he raised his head and met the gaze of everyone in the room. "I came to this building today not to relive what happened to me, but to explain what's been happening to people who don't have microphones." A hush rippled through the chamber. "When I walked into Lexington International Airport 6 days ago, I was a private citizen. I hadn't tweeted. I hadn't spoken. I wasn't even late for my flight, but I was seen as a threat. Not because of what I said or did, but because I matched a profile someone was trained to fear." He paused. 3 bullets were fired, and none of them hit me. "But this hearing isn't because I survived. It's because there was a camera." Senator Hartwell, a skeptical older man from the other side of the aisle, leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, surely you understand airports operate under heightened risk." Jasper cut in, calm but firm. "I understand what risk looks like. I've worked with national energy grids. I've partnered with the Department of Defense. I've sat in classified briefings on digital threats that could cripple this country in 10 seconds. He leaned closer. "You know what I've never seen? A threat profile that says black man in a hoodie." There were murmurs, some uncomfortable, some impressed. Jasper continued, "I'm not here to argue ideology. I'm here to present facts." Slide 47 wasn't a mistake. It was a directive. It trained officers to assume. It trained them to fear silence, to escalate normal behavior into coded suspicion. He tapped the table lightly. "And we've collected data to prove it. Not just from Lexington. From 9 other airports, hundreds of complaints, 47 settlements buried in non-disclosure agreements." "This isn't isolated." Senator Marchand lifted a file in front of her. "We've reviewed the documents your team submitted, including whistleblower testimony and internal training decks." "I have to ask, what do you want from this committee, Mr. Reed?" Jasper didn't blink. "A full federal audit of all TSA and contracted airport security training materials. Mandatory anti-bias certification for all officers. Independent civilian oversight boards stationed in every major U.S. airport. And federal penalties for wrongful use of force or targeting based on non-criminal appearance cues." Hartwell scoffed slightly. "That's ambitious." "No," Jasper said. "It's overdue." Silence fell again. Until a new voice spoke. From the second row of the gallery, a tall, broad-shouldered man stood slowly. Press passes hung around his neck, but he wasn't part of the media. His voice carried clearly. "My name is James Keller, former TSA officer. I was trained with that slide. I was told off record to follow my gut. My gut wasn't the problem. The problem was what they told me to see." Security moved toward him, but Senator Marchand raised her hand. "Let him speak." Keller stepped forward, eyes locking on Jasper. "I saw what happened to you, sir. And I saw what I didn't do. I saw myself in the silence of every officer who watched and didn't say a word." His hands trembled. "I quit 2 days ago. And I came here because I couldn't live another week pretending that what happened to you was an accident. It wasn't." Jasper stood slowly, meeting him halfway. They shook hands. Firm, public, televised. A single act that said more than any line of testimony ever could. Later, Back at the hotel suite, Naomi played the hearing clip again on mute, watching the expressions of the senators as Keller spoke. Jasper stood near the window, staring out at the lights of the city. "You planned that?" she asked, still watching. "No," Jasper said, "but I hoped for it." Lionel walked in with a laptop and placed it on the table. "They're calling for a vote. Not on legislation yet, but on authorizing the audit. Bipartisan. Fast-track approval." Edward leaned back, smiling slightly. "They're scared of you." "They should be," Jasper said, "but they should be more scared of the people watching." Naomi turned. "What happens if they stall?" Jasper didn't hesitate. "Then we ground them." Lionel's brow furrowed. "Meaning?" "Every corporation that supported us will stop all air travel through any airport refusing to comply. We'll expose insurance risk, shareholder liability, patent lawsuits. We won't just protest, we'll paralyze." Naomi smiled. "You want reform?" Jasper finally turned from the window. "No," he said. "I want a reckoning." Just then, Edward's phone buzzed. He glanced down and raised his eyebrows. "It's from the FAA. You might want to see this." He handed the phone to Jasper. On screen was a preliminary ruling. Subject: Immediate review of Lexington International Airport's operating license status. Suspended pending investigation. Effective. Immediately below it, a line of text in bold. Public interest demands accountability. This is no longer optional. Jasper read it, closed the phone, and exhaled. "This was never about me walking through a terminal," he said. "This was about what follows after the doors close." And now those doors were finally opening. The air inside the courtroom was sharp, the kind of oxygen that seemed filtered through tension. Reporters filled every available seat, their fingers poised over keyboards, ready to strike. The judge hadn't entered yet, but the gallery was already humming. At the defense table, Brent Mallory sat alone, shoulders squared but face drained of color. His uniform had been replaced by a stiff grey suit, but the stiffness in his jaw remained the same, rigid, defensive, stubborn. Across the aisle, Jasper Reed sat silently in the second row. He didn't look at Mallory. He didn't need to. The weight of everything that led to this moment settled in the stillness between them. The clerk called the session to order. Cameras rolled. The gavel struck. Judge Miriam Granger, a woman known for her razor-sharp rulings and zero tolerance for procedural nonsense, took her seat. She looked out over the room with eyes that had sentenced war criminals and white-collar CEOs alike. "Today's hearing addresses the charges brought against former officer Brent Mallory," she said clearly. "Reckless endangerment, abuse of authority, falsification of official reports, and obstruction of justice." Jasper leaned forward slightly. This wasn't just legal. This was personal. The prosecution's first move wasn't footage, it was a witness, James Keller. The former TSA officer walked slowly to the stand, his demeanor stripped of any bravado. He sat, was sworn in, and adjusted the microphone with a trembling hand. "What did you observe on the day of the incident?" the prosecutor asked. Keller's voice cracked, then steadied. "I saw Mallory reach for his weapon before any word had been exchanged. I saw Mr. Reed standing still. I heard no threats, no escalation." "Just gunfire." "And what were you told in your training regarding use of force?" Keller's eyes flickered to Mallory before settling on the judge. "We were told to act on instinct, but instinct was shaped by bias." Slide 47 told us what to fear, and Mallory didn't hesitate. In the gallery, a few reporters gasped quietly. Others began typing furiously. The defense tried to shake him. "Mr. Keller," Isn't it true that security officers are trained to respond rapidly to perceived threats in crowded public spaces? Keller held firm. Yes. But Mr. Reed wasn't a threat. He was a target. Gasps this time weren't quiet. Next came the footage. Again. The terminal. The stillness, the 3 shots, the aftermath. But this time, for the first time in court, the footage paused just before the first shot, and Jasper's voice was layered in as part of the exhibit. I asked which gate the DC flight was boarding from. Silence. Then the gun. The courtroom sat in stunned quiet. Back at the defense table, Mallory leaned toward his attorney, whispering frantically. Then, in a shocking move, his attorney stood up and addressed the court. Your Honor, the defense requests a recess. Judge Granger raised a brow. For what purpose? Mallory's attorney hesitated, then said the words no one expected. My client is prepared to enter a guilty plea. He wishes to offer a formal statement. The courtroom broke into low murmurs before the judge pounded the gavel again. You'll do it under oath, she said. Wha-ha. Mallory rose slowly. Every camera pivoted to catch his face. He stepped to the microphone and cleared his throat. I joined the force to protect people, he began. But somewhere along the way, protecting became suspecting, and suspecting became profiling. He looked directly at Jasper. I didn't see a man that day. I saw a threat because the training told me to. That doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing does. His voice wavered. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't clean, but it was real. For the first time since that day in the terminal, Jasper looked him in the eyes. Not with forgiveness, but with clarity. Later, outside the courthouse, the crowd had already gathered. Protesters, supporters, reporters. Security. But what they weren't expecting was for Jasper to walk to the microphones. He paused for a moment, then spoke into a dozen flashing cameras. Today wasn't justice. Today was accountability. He held up a copy of the new draft legislation. This is called the Safe Passage Act. It requires civilian review of every airport incident involving use of force. Real transparency. Real oversight. Because apologies don't change systems. Policies do. A reporter called out. Mr. Reed, do you forgive Officer Mallory? Jasper paused, then answered with careful precision. I'm not here to grant absolution. I'm here to prevent the next Jasper Reed from being shot at in silence. And with that, he stepped back, refusing further questions. That night, in his hotel suite, Jasper sat by the window. The city lights blinked back at him. Lionel handed him a tablet. You should see this. On the screen was a video feed. A group of airport security officers from 3 different cities had filmed a joint statement. Off-duty, unarmed, unfiltered. One of them, a black woman in her 30s, looked into the camera. My name is Carla Jennings. I work airport security in Dallas. And after what happened to Mr. Reed, I'm speaking out. I've seen the bias. I've lived it. And I'm not staying silent anymore. The video cut to others. Latino officers, Arab American guards, even white officers speaking up. We were told what to fear, but no one taught us who we were supposed to protect. Jasper leaned back. Naomi looked at him, then spoke. We didn't just break the silence, Jasper. We gave people permission to speak. He didn't respond immediately. Just stared at the screen as the last frame faded to black. Then, quietly, now let's give them something worth building. The sky above Lexington was a muted blue, the kind that blurred the line between dawn and reflection. A year had passed. But the terminal, once a place of silence, then scandal, then transformation, was unrecognizable. Reporters gathered on the newly constructed concourse, microphones clipped and angled. TSA officers stood in new uniforms. Community oversight officials observed quietly from the sidelines. Rows of cameras flanked the press platform, but the moment was waiting on one person. From the far edge of the tarmac, a black car pulled up. The door opened slowly. Jasper Reed stepped out. This time, he wasn't hiding behind a hoodie. He wore a dark navy suit, open-collared shirt, no tie. No armor, just presence. His face was calm but not soft. It was the face of a man who had walked through fire and rebuilt the very ground he was nearly erased on. As he approached the ribbon stretched across the main entrance, the crowd fell into a hushed reverence. He took his place at the podium, adjusted the mic, and scanned the crowd. Familiar faces stood among the reporters: Senator Marchand, Keller. Even Eric Quinn, the quiet janitor who once handed over a flash drive that changed everything. "I've been asked to give a speech," Jasper said, a faint smile breaking the tension. "But I think what we built here already says what needs to be said." He turned toward the terminal. The new signage gleamed under morning light. Reed Terminal, a gateway to accountability. There were quiet gasps. A few in the crowd even clapped without meaning to. Jasper let the silence linger, then spoke again. "This place once stood for everything wrong with the system. Unchecked power. Profiling masked as protocol. Silence pretending to be safety. Now it stands for something else. Proof that when people refuse to look away, things change." He looked out at the crowd, his voice lowering. "I wasn't supposed to walk out of this terminal with anything but trauma. Instead, we turned it into a blueprint." Naomi stepped up behind him and handed him a red velvet ribbon. Inside it, stitched in small silver thread, were the names of every person who had filed a buried complaint in the past decade. Names no one had said out loud, until now. Jasper held up the ribbon. "This isn't just about justice," he said. "This is about memory. About making sure the next person with a boarding pass isn't met with a weapon, but with welcome." He paused. "And let me be clear. This victory doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every traveler who walked through a terminal afraid to speak up. It belongs to whistleblowers, reformers, everyday citizens who refuse to look the other way. All I did was survive long enough to listen." He stepped back, turned toward the entrance and held the ribbon out. Keller, now a civilian in a dark windbreaker, took the scissors and approached. Together, they cut the ribbon clean through. A wave of applause rolled through the crowd. Not thunderous, not performative, just honest. After the event, Jasper walked the length of the terminal alone. Screens played a looped message from the new oversight board. Banners with the slogan, "Fly Through Fairness," hung from the ceiling. But what caught his eye was a young boy near the window, maybe 10 years old, staring out at the plains. Jasper walked over and crouched beside him. "First time flying?" he asked. The boy nodded. "Going to meet my dad. Never been on a plane before." Jasper smiled. "You're gonna love it." "It's not about the takeoff. It's about where you land." The boy looked up at him curiously. "Are you somebody important?" Jasper stood slowly, voice quiet. "I'm just someone who didn't stay quiet." Later that evening, back in his office, Jasper sat down for a rare broadcast interview. The host leaned in, clearly moved. "Mr. Reed, after everything, why didn't you sue them for millions? You had every right." Jasper looked straight into the camera. "Because this was never about money. It was about meaning. You can't put a price tag on trust, but you can build a system that protects it." The host blinked, caught off guard. Jasper continued. And if you're watching this, wondering whether one person can change a system, remember this. They shot at me thinking I was powerless.
10 minutes later, I owned the entire terminal. He leaned forward, steady and clear. If that hit you, share this story. Talk about it. Demand better, because this isn't just a story about what happened. It's a warning about what could happen again, unless we all stay loud. He rose from his chair, removed the mic, and walked off set. No dramatic music, no applause, just purpose. And if you're reading or listening right now, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a place where you didn't feel safe just because of who you are? Have you ever stayed quiet because you thought no one would listen? Now you've seen what happens when one man refuses to be silent. So don't be silent either. Subscribe, share. Stand up. Let's make sure no one ever has to fight just to board a plane again. Black billionaire. Targeted at airport. 10 minutes later, he owned the entire terminal. Now it's your turn to own your voice.